The New York Post. Shares of firms tied to New York City real estate tank over fears of Mamdani's rent freeze. The Zoran effect. Already, people are losing money and preparing their exodus. Not only that, but Gristedes grocery store owners threatens to leave New York City. Katsimatitis, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, said to disapprove of mayoral candidate's plan to open city-run grocery stores. Okay, let's just try and help walk you through this, guys. If you're a communist, leftist, or young person, please listen. I would like to give you a simple 1 + 1 = 2 here. So we've got freeze the rent. Okay, he says, jacking up rent stabilized apartments by 9% and counting. As mayor, Zoran will immediately freeze the rent for all stabilized tenants and use every available resources to build the housing New Yorkers need to bring down the rent. The number one reason working families are leaving our city is the housing crisis. The mayor has the power to change that. I will just start by saying it costs lots of money to maintain a building. Mm-hmm. If the amount of money going in through rent is less than the amount of money to maintain, say, the plumbing, the heat, the flooring, the walls, the electricity, city taxes, permits, all of that stuff, they can't rent it out. This is the problem with rent stabilization. So what we've actually seen in places like New York and LA, people who own big buildings will decide not to rent out the units because the cost of having a tenant due to wear, tear, and other issues is greater than the rent they actually bring in. Additionally, buildings need a superintendent. So there's somebody they got to pay a salary to run the building. And this is what a lot of these commies don't understand. Okay. You guys you own a house? You own property? Okay. I own a house and I'm not there. And then one day I come back in and it's a room I hadn't been in for a while. And what do I find on a ceiling? Crack. Not a crack. Stain.
Water.
Oh, ouch.
Uh-huh.
Time to call Home Depot, baby.
And then we cut open the ceiling and what do we find? We have a big leak and the water everywhere.
Yep.
These things happen. So you can't just, these people really don't get it when they're like, put a homeless person in an empty house. It's like
That's
that house will
ridiculous idea.
House fall apart.
Yeah.
We had a debate with one of our buddies over water damage, and we were explaining that if your basement floods, you have to get it dehumidified. You got to bring in the fans.
Right.
And he was convinced it's fine. What are you talking about? That doesn't happen. And this is what these people in New York are doing. So when he says freeze the rent, what happens? The landlord says, when this person leaves, the security deposit is for like if they punched a hole in the wall or there's some reasonable damages that I can argue. But the general wear and tear is going to, you need remodeling. You need a superintendent to monitor to make sure that you're up to the laws. So freezing rent makes no sense. You freeze the rent and they'll just stop renting. So what do you got to do? He points it out. Build affordable housing. Indeed. Well, I wonder why it is that LA hasn't done that despite being called the homeless capital of the developed world. Certainly LA has the money and the taxes on the wealthy to build affordable housing. Why can't they do it? Firstly, it's called NIMBY. Nobody will allow anybody to build affordable housing.
Not in my backyard.
Mm-hmm. And then you ask yourself, well, if it's affordable housing, how do you build housing units below market cost? Meaning, if there is a man who is a laborer and he says, I am entitled to the fruits of my labor, the workers of the world unite. Okay, then he comes to you and says, the workers of the world demand $100,000 to build that unit. Well, there's nothing you can do about it, right? He's entitled to the fruits of his labor. So what happens then is you say, we need to build this at a cheap, we need to rent this out for cheaper, but we got to pay that guy more money than we got. Where's that deficit come from? Easy. Other people's money. The only problem is...
And will you stop being so realistic and practical?
I'll try.
It's painful.
But when you tax, you're going to tax the rich, they're going to leave. And then, lastly, for the city-owned grocery stores, my favorite thing here
Oh, yes, this is great.
Why is Gristedes going to leave? Okay. The government doesn't pay fees to itself. So now you've got a business with no permitting. They say there's no profit incentive. Profit just means the person who owns the bodega gets to pay his rent and take his daughter to her piano recital and pay gas for his car. Profit doesn't mean money to go on a yacht. So they're saying they're going to run profitless grocery stores, below cost goods. What will that do? Long story short, no one can compete with artificially deflated goods. You have 15,000 convenience stores in New York City. Most of them are small businesses. If you strip away 4% of their revenue per year, they go out of business. And not even. That's most of
even
these
less
things.
than that, yeah.
They're operating on like a 3% margin. So if you strip 1% of their revenue, these people are living paycheck to paycheck. You take away 1%, what happens? The guy says, I'm just not making enough anymore. I'm going to go get a job somewhere else. Yeah. Then they all start closing down. You create food deserts. And the best part, what comes after the food deserts? Phil?
Well, all of the grocery stores are closed.
So there's no grocery stores.
Yeah.
Everyone's got to go to only a small amount of government-run grocery stores.
Yeah, and then food lines.
Exactly.
Because there's nothing there.
We call them bread lines.
Bread lines, food lines.
But there you go. Congratulations, New York. That's the path you're on.
And they could have seen this happening during COVID. I was working at an apartment complex when the rent was when people didn't have to pay rent for however long it was, and the people that owned our apartment, the apartment that I worked in, they didn't even live there. They lived in Florida. This was like their one big investment. They owned 2 apartment complexes, and they were constantly, we would be trying to get people to pay rent that they just weren't doing because they didn't have to. They weren't being forced to at that time. And there was more than a few occasions where the apartment complex almost had to be sold off because they just didn't have the ability to collect the rent from those people.
Let me read this for you. He says, as mayor, Zoran will create a network of city-owned grocery stores focused on keeping prices low, not making a profit. Without having to pay rent or property taxes, they will reduce overhead and pass on savings to shoppers. They will buy and sell at wholesale prices, centralize warehousing and distribution, and partner with local neighborhoods on products and sourcing. With New York City already spending millions of dollars to subsidize private grocery store operators, which are not even required to take SNAP and WIC, we should redirect public money to a real public option. So just to stress, he's not saying there'll be no profit motive. He's saying they're also going to create artificial deflationary competition by not requiring rent or property taxes. Good luck running any business in New York when he does this.
Nobody should be more angry than the business owners who have to constantly deal with local government trying to find any reason to put them out of business.
Like he hit on already, there's already a problem with them, like basically subsidizing these private grocery stores. And if you go to these grocery stores, it literally looks like a bomb went off in there.
Really?
And like,
hey, you don't rag on our bodegas, man.
Well,
I used to go every day and I'd say, I want roast beef with white American cheese.
That's right.
We don't want those artificial food dyes. I don't need coal tar in my cheese. And I get on a Kaiser bun and I'd say, smash it.
Can you imagine
Put it in the grill and they go,
can you imagine
what
like
I'm talking about.
DMV employees running a grocery store? Like you're going to drink 3-month expired milk and just like drop dead on the street. Like that's the future.
You're going to think they're trying to poison you, but really it's just negligence.
Okay, but guys, I got to go back to the earlier point. If you import people from S-hole countries, I'm quoting President Trump here, you're going to have S-hole expectations.
But this is also something that you could point
I know
out
it's the rich whites, but I'm saying there's other...
But that's why I'm in favor of Trump's South Sudan deportation plan. Because it's not about an ish-hole country. It's about the ranking of... It's degrees of ish-hole. You know what I mean? Like, the United States has some, pretty crappy areas. You know what I mean? So, but we're not crap hole nation. We'll keep it family friendly.
Right.
And then we might say, when people come here from Guatemala or Honduras, many people might say that's a crap hole nation. And I say, whoa. Relative to what? So when the criminals come here and Trump is deporting them to South Sudan, that's actually going to improve South Sudan. Their GDP is $300.
So it's actually compassionate conservatism.
Better than North Minneapolis.
It's redistribution of wealth.
Yeah.
So look, somebody who comes here from Guatemala, the fact that they've been to a Buffalo Wild Wings, this was a big story during the caravans in Trump's first term.
Yeah.
They were interviewed by the LA Times, and they asked one of the migrants in the caravan, why do you want to come to America? And quite literally, it's a quote, I miss Buffalo Wild Wings. So hold on. You think anybody in South Sudan knows anything about Buffalo Wild Wings? Imagine what would happen if you, Matt, went back 500 years to Europe, right? The stories you could tell, the information you'd bring, you'd say, look, I got to be honest, I could never build a computer in a million years, but I do know basic things like, how magnifying glasses can, or you can use water or like that. I know things that could be made. I know what's possible. And you could probably give information that they'd be like, we never even thought of that concept. I mean, the easiest way to explain it is zero had to be discovered. Literally, the concept of mathematical zero had to be discovered. Humans didn't know to even fathom imaginary numbers. There was a point where some dude discovered air because they just thought there was nothing there until eventually someone was like, hey, there's something there. And they figured it out. It's air. Or how about Archimedes' law of water displacement? My children know these things. So if you got a guy who comes from Honduras and he has been to Buffalo Wild Wings 75 times, you bring him to South Sudan, he's going to be like, look, I got to be honest. You get me chicken wings, you get me flour, you get me eggs, maybe a little bit of salt. I can make deep fried chicken wings, and I know what kind of sauces they had and what they tasted like. We could figure this out. You could bring Buffalo Wild Wings to South Sudan.
You know what I'd say if I could go 500 years back to Europe? I'd say, listen, guys, you're fighting the Muslim invasion. Just stop, because your great-great-great-great-grandchildren are just going to let them in. So don't fight them, because you're just going to give Europe over to these guys anyway. So,
Well, it's
right?
also funny.
Easy prediction.
Funny, like you were saying, because in Nairobi there was a documentary that came out recently, and a lot of British youth, quote unquote British youth, that get deported from Britain, so they're Kenyan nationals. They return to Nairobi, but they set up London-style street gangs, and they've completely ran the city for like the last 5 years. And they call it like, we're roadmen and stuff, and they wear like it's like 90 degrees out. They're wearing
This
like
is a thing?
shiesties. Oh, there's a whole documentary. I don't remember who. And then also, when I was in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, there was a fake Starbucks there because people got deported from the UK. They're like, I need a good cup of coffee. So they set up a fake Starbucks, and it's like branding that's 10 years old, but by all accounts, it looked like a Starbucks.
Hey, man.
Incredible.
This is why people invest in other countries, in all seriousness, because people, there was a guy I met a long time ago, ultra wealthy guy, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And you want to know what his business model was? He literally just took things that already existed and worked for at least a year or two in the United States. And then he went to developing nations and
Smart.
said, he was like, okay, what percentage of your population has a smartphone? And they're like, at this point, 60, 70% have low cost Android phones. And then he was like, take a look at this app. Everybody's using it. It makes $10 billion a year. Let's make one for your country. And then boom, now he just made $1 million a year off of the entire country. Not a lot for a developing nation, but you do that 10 times, he made himself a lot of money. And he didn't, there's nothing really to it. The idea works. We know for a fact it does. All we have to do is make the app and the system for your country, and everyone's going to start using this, and it will boost economic activity.
So when are you starting Timcast of South Sudan? That's what
we already have it.
Oh,
Right.
All right.
AI
We hired a guy in a beanie. He's been down there building it for the past 3 years.
How's
No, I'm
his?
kidding.
Is he good? Does he skate too?
He does.
Okay.
Yeah, they got Ugandan Skate Club. They're pretty cool.
If you want to think about something as far as like the incongruity of their belief system, is like last week we were talking about immigration. We were talking about how Trump was going to deport everyone and this country was built on immigrants. Well, now what this guy is proposing is to put a bunch of bodegas run by legal immigrants out of business, despite the fact that the week before you were talking about how everything that we're doing regarding immigrants in this country is evil. And they're proposing something that would take away much of their livelihood.
You know, there's one thing that I think that people need to, or people should kind of pay attention to. When the left says, oh, we're a nation of immigrants, that implies that every single person that comes to the United States is exactly the same. That means where they come from doesn't matter. What they believe doesn't matter. How they want to, the society that they want to engage with doesn't matter. We're a nation of immigrants. And so all immigrants are the same. Immigrant is just the same. They're all the same. And that's absolutely wrong. It's absolutely wrong. The culture that you come from matters. And if you do not endorse, and I was saying this earlier, but I think it's something that more Americans really need to vocalize and talk about when they're arguing with people, whether it be on the internet or whatever. If you don't want to be an American, if you want to come to America to change America into something else, the United States should not allow you to come to America. And that should not be even remotely controversial.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.